The world has been repeatedly shocked by abuses from the very people we were taught to trust, the clergy. And while that may not mean a lot to people who either aren't Catholic or haven't been abused, the reality is that this is a ubiquitous problem that affects many of the people we encounter on a daily basis, including likely even some of you watching this. Today, we're going to talk to someone who has an inside viewpoint and experience of a very traumatic nature. So I'm telling you in advance that this is very graphic. This show has to do with sexual abuse and the clergy, but also about how we can begin healing this, because the bottom line is it's a dynamic that has to start being healed in order for us to have healthy society throughout the world, and this is a global issue. So let's say hi to Wes.
Hello.
Hi, Wes. Hey, I'm hearing our cars zipping by you right now.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It already went down the road.
Okay, all right. So we know every now and then we're going to hear a car zipping by because your Wi-Fi connection's a little bit better where you are right now than going inside. So we'll go for it. Okay. All right.
Yes.
First of all, we want to hear your story. You were born in Poland, and you decided, in your 20s, that you were going to have a life of service to the church. That is what your heart desired to do. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. I was 19 when I joined the School of Ministry.
Okay. And you were there in seminary for a number of years. You did obtain your degree, a master's in theology. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In 94, yes.
Okay. So you were devoted, you were committed, and at this time, you're a heterosexual guy, but your devotion is going to be to the service of the church and your God, and celibacy was certainly one of the mandates that would occur, and you had accepted this, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so now we're going to go to a time when you have been through these years of education, many years. You've been in seminary, and you are now on the verge of your ordination, and that's when your life took really a very tragic turn. And again, you've made something that's useful and good for others out of it, but nonetheless, there was a lot of damage done to you. Let's talk about what happened on that fateful day.
After many years of training and obviously struggling with myself, because celibacy is not a very easy thing to live out, and celibacy is not necessarily about sex. Having it or not having it. It's a way of life. It's a way of commitment. It's the way your relationships are with both men and women. After many years in the institution, I have become aware along the way of problems that certain clergy do not live celibacy. And because of that, I began research into this. I was curious type. I was more scientific than probably most of my colleagues. I wanted to know the answer to the very simple question: why they do what they do. What is it? I couldn't relate myself to a very simple thought that a grown-up man, young man like myself, in my 20s at that point, could in any way, shape, and form be engaged with a youngster, a 10-year younger child than himself. I just couldn't see the possibility that a grown-up person can have a meaningful relationship, very special relationship with a child. I just couldn't understand that. It was beyond the comprehension of my family background, beyond the comprehension of my culture. I heard the stories before of things like that, but it was for most of the time it was understanding. Oh, that happens to some people who are creeps, people who are lowlifes who do those kind of things. It never occurred to me, just to be about the age of 25, that this could be actually people that we trust in the society. It could be people such as clergymen On my assignment, I was assigned to a pastor um, back on the East Coast. I don't want to mention the location at this point of this interview. And the pastor um, took raped me basically during the night. When I found myself was after the situation.
Say that again. The pastor raped you during the night, and
Right.
what about after the situation?
Well, after I woke up after the situation. When I woke up, everything was done and over with. It was a total shock. So
My understanding is you were drugged.
I didn't know at the time. I suspect so.
Well, it happens. Date rape, drugs are.
I didn't know. I didn't know about such a things. In those cases, it is true because this was my 30th birthday, and he is the one who prepared the drinks shortly before I was going to bed. I took about maybe 4, maybe 5 sips of it, maybe 1/8 of the glass, whatever it was. He's the one who prepared it.
Okay. And so okay, let's talk about how you came about the realization, because it's fairly obvious there are physical symptoms, of course, and the fact that he was the last person you were in contact with, I assume. So let's talk about what happened at that point.
Well, upon waking up, obviously it was a shock. The first intention is to clean yourself up. Things hurt. I was frantic running around. In fact, I did not suspect him at first, that he was the one who did it. I thought it was somebody else who entered directly. So I actually knocked on his door to the point of realization that the man that I kicked off myself had a breath of alcohol on himself. That's how I recognized. That's how I actually went into his face and I said, "It was you." And the reaction was shutting the door in front of my face. But these are the details. What happened, the most shocking thing was what began happening to myself within about 3 days after the event. And this is what I discovered is pretty much what happens to a lot of victims. Let's say victims who are straight, who never had the experience. That you begin looking at another fellow man in a completely different light than you ever did before. And the first occurrence was towards my best friend. It's still in the school, from the school. We went out for...
You're saying that up to this point, you were straight.
I was straight. I didn't have experience with men, but I related to men in a natural, straightforward way, not sexual way.
Right.
From that point on, the thoughts in my head began gathering to look at the man in a sexual way. Okay?
Yeah.
And this was an absolute shock to myself. I honestly, I thought I was going nuts. And I probably was. And yeah, a lot of suffering with that, a lot of identity crisis. And as graphic, as least graphic as I can make this, I developed an urge to be in a sexual situation with another man.
And how...
That never happened before. I was 30 years old.
Right. And you know, some people are watching this saying, well, is that something that maybe was a repressed desire of yours that you simply didn't know about? Or was this something that came so sideways that you couldn't have ever expected it?
No, absolutely not. Before I went to the seminary, I had a healthy relationship. I had a girlfriend for 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was never in a situation where I would have a desire to experience sexual experience with another man. Mm-hmm. But this was the first ever in my life, something like that.
So this trauma somehow had such a deep effect or impact on your entire being. It's almost like it flipped something in your psyche.
In the spirit.
In the spirit. Talk about that, because this is really what we're talking about.
Right. It was a reprogramming and beginning of reconstituting of the entire being of who I was. And when I looked for help, nobody had any answer to this. I consulted several professional people who basically threw their hands up in the air and said, well, I guess those things happen like that. You have to deal with it. But when you ask for specific, tell me, help me, they had no answer. Because unfortunately, at this point, I believe, that our counseling is based exclusively on a presupposition that those things can be switched in your brain, that there is, it's like almost like a flip, like a switch on and off. There's certain things you can remove or block yourself with the willpower or otherwise, or drugs. And what I discovered is, it's actually, the answer is somewhere else. The answer is at your natural energy flow. And that's what was accessed. That's what was jeopardized. It was not, from that time of experience, it was over 2 years. Over 2 years. 26 months to be exact. When I actually met a person who actually, after sharing my experience, he knew exactly what was that.
Okay, so you've explained it as a reversal in your actual energetic field, that this was something that impacted you on all dimensions of your being.
Oh, absolutely.
And so this is a very interesting part of your story about the person you met and how they were able to help you at this time, because you must have been devastated. And first of all, what did you do after you found this out? I mean, I know you were kicked out of seminary at that point, and
No, I was never kicked out from the seminary. I graduated the seminary. I was in the ministry,
right?
And the powers to be actually left me with this perpetrator of mine in the assignment.
Okay.
And it took him just about less than 12 months to do the PR damage on myself. Obviously, I was a foreign speaker. So he was stating in his writing to the cardinal that I was failing in the ministry, that I wasn't able to perform as well. Interestingly enough, since 6 months before the event, my ministry and my language skills and everything else and the cultural awareness was just fine. I wouldn't get ordained a deacon if it wasn't.
Yes.
And then I went into the regress. Interesting enough, even if I went to the regress, obviously it was activated by something. The bottom line was I was pushed off the deck and became homeless. 3.5 weeks living out of the car.
Well, this makes sense. Your whole life had been in this cloistered environment where everything was cared for. You wouldn't have had a backup plan to that.
I did not expect this turn of events of my life. And lo and behold, I became a truck driver, an 18-wheeler driver. Because I had nothing else. I had nothing else to go after.
But it sounds like that was a blessing, because this is where a chance, or not a chance, either way, encounter occurred. Tell us what happened from there.
After the initial training with the company name is Schneider National out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I was assigned with a co-driver, who was of knowledge how those things might work. I shared with him what happened to me, because things were hurting and things weren't right. And after about an hour of conversation, he looked at me, he says, I think I know what your problem is. I said, what is that? He goes, you have a damage to the sexual orientation. That's what your problem is.
Now, this
My,
man was Native American, was he not? And he had a certain kind of wisdom.
well, he was from that tradition, from that background.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell if he was a part of the tribe or if he wasn't, but the fact of the matter is that he was very familiar with this.
And when you say you were hurting, it wasn't just spiritually and psychologically. Your body was still suffering.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I was experiencing pain from the waist down in the area of approximately a foot and a half in the radius.
Yeah. Yeah. Trauma to the entire field.
Right. And he spoke with his people, whoever they were. And approximately after a week, he asked me to go with him for several days. It was 3 days to be exact. We took the break from the driving. We parked the truck, and we went to speak with the medicine men. Not to speak because I couldn't understand the language, but to be subject to some type of a procedure that began the process of healing at that point. And the question was, how do you damage the glass? How do you put together the glass that was broken? What kind of glue can you use? It will not be noticeable. Is there anything like that? That's the ultimate question. Can you reverse the damage?
Can you talk to us a little bit about, as best you're able or allowed, for your own confidentiality reasons, about how this process worked over the course of several sessions with the elders of the tribe?
The first session was based on a lot of prayers, I would say. I couldn't understand them. A lot of incense or something similar to incense. But I was told by the elder that this process will take, that I have to follow exactly what they suggest. They won't hurt me any more than whatever it was at the point. But they're going to work their best towards the process of recovery for this. And I would say the field that was damaged, it took another person of a very strong will and power of the opposite sex of myself to actually do it.
But it wasn't, you didn't have sex with this person, but
no.
They worked with your energy in a healing manner.
Right, absolutely. I was specifically told by the healer that this is not about having sex. You cannot have sex with the person. This is not going to repair it. The person has to pull you over back to your original natural field to repair the damage or the indentation, as they explained to me, in the natural energy flow. So your body can recover, your spirit can recover. The integrity of the mind, body, and spirit was at that point was damaged. And this is how I developed the theory of primary pilot energy field damage. Mm-hmm. That's actually my own description.
Before we go into how that works, maybe just tell us a little bit, as the sessions went on, what you started to experience by way of your own recovery inside yourself.
After about third session, I noticed a serenity, and the pain went away from the body part that was bothering me for over 2 years.
Okay.
That was the first visible, noticeable. And the next one was, it was a time when you almost like in the situation of limbo. You're either going to go flip or flap. So you're pretty much not healed, but you're not damaged yet. It's kind of a situation of suspension. But after about 6th session, I began feeling of being that I was being put back together. The things that were working as I used to remember about myself, which was unbelievable discovery. So,
And ultimately, you found that you began feeling like you did before this event occurred, a full healing,
right,
really mending body, mind, and soul back together.
right.
Well, you didn't keep this to yourself. As time went on, there were other people who had been damaged and abused in the same way. And my understanding is that you took them to the same elders for a similar ceremony. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I have recommended, because obviously I was not a part of the healing process, but I have recommended what happened to me. I share with what happened to me, and I recommended where to go for help. And those things seem to be working. And in fact, the person who was originally the elder who was part of my healing process, no longer alive. He passed away. But there is somebody else who took over. Obviously, this is very interesting because this specific type of a tribe, they do not take any money. You cannot buy this process for money. They will not accept. I actually offered payment for this, and they said absolutely not. It was given freely to us. We have to give it away.
And there were young people involved as well. You brought some people who were minors over to them for healing, right?
Well, when it happened to them, and what was noticeable, the last time I spoke with one of the people on the inside, they told me that the last person I sent it in was very difficult to work with because it happened when he was around 11 years old, and the time lapse was approximately 15 years. So apparently, the longer it takes on those things, the harder it gets to recorrect it.
Sure.
Especially for the young person who is not really stabilized yet in the psycho-spiritual, sexual identity. And those things get settled. So it's, I would say it's probably a very difficult process. The younger the person gets abused, the worse it gets, or the more difficult it gets to actually recover them. And again, very important part. The victim have to want to return back to what it's supposed to.
Right.
It's a power of the will. If you're dealing with the person who says, well, okay, I enjoy who I am right now, there's nothing you can really do from outside. I don't believe you can force it. So the power of the will is very important.
Now, we tend to take this down oftentimes to individual lascivious type of priests, but do you think there's a larger program that's in existence here? Oftentimes in conspiracy circles, for example, they'll speak about the satanic practices and sexual practices of the elite, the elite, which can be across the board any number of people, and also of the higher ups in certain of the religious institutions. Do you think there's a larger program of inculcating these boys into this kind of abuse for a larger, not higher, for a larger purpose?
I can only speak on my research and experience from the diocese that I was involved with. Prior to what happened to me, there was a passing on the victims from one individual to the other. It was cultivating. It involved bringing, even the recent case I became aware of, fresh out of Colombia, where 15 students were brought from Colombia to this specific seminary. And Some of the students were not obviously enculturated. They have been falling on grades and language and so on and so forth. Obviously, when you student in that situation, you're looking for helping hand. And several of those clergymen, those predatory clergymen, have given those students the helping hand in exchange for sexual favors. We're dealing with the adults, but still, students, still people in vulnerable situations.
Yes.
People who do not have a full consent of the will, although they are adults, but their economic and their life situation is not as such. So it will be impossible for them to be totally objective in their decision-making process.
Yes.
So sourcing of those things, I think, I do not have specific data. I'm not an investigative journalist, but I would not be surprised one day that we're going to discover that large international network exists that actually sources those people for sexual purposes only. I can tell you this much from my experience and from my very first thoughts, that when things happen to me, my first reaction was to do something very similar to another fellow person, to a man.
Right.
That's why I was going nuts, because I knew that I was better than that.
Well, it was totally out of sync with the historical version of yourself that you knew prior to that.
Absolutely. But I guess I was old enough to have enough judgment to know this wasn't right, and to fight this off. Now, I do not know what would have happened to me if I was 12 years old. I do not know how I will respond, or 15 years old.
Almost like the trauma itself creates some kind of a bloodlust of sorts on a energetic, psychological level.
It's a depression in the mind and the soul, the energy field, that you actually want to recover what you lost. The subconscious is the same logic as you have two bottles of water connected in the middle, and then you lose half of it while the other half to try to compensate.
Right. Right.
The nature wants balance. Unfortunately, in this situation, the balance is coming from the wrong source. Almost like we used to say in the military, when somebody steals your spoon so you can eat your meal, go on and take the spoon from somebody else. Chain reaction.
Right. Well, and the stats would show that, I think you say 90% of people that are abused in this way often end up as some kind of perpetrator in the future.
Right. And that is because the energy, psycho-spiritual energy field is so damaged that they have a tendency to hoping to recoup, in many cases, the innocence that was lost.
I think at this time it would be a good idea to introduce the theory that you came up around this, that you brought up in the very beginning, and how this damage to this matrix works, and what the recovery process has to be.
Are we speaking about primary pilot?
Yes.
Primarily pilot energy field damage.
Yes.
Well, in order to understand what the dynamics of the damage, we need to understand as a society and as people, individual, both of the men and women, for what the base, what is sex in itself, in its base, how it's supposed to be, or how it was designed. Whoever designed. For some people, the God designed. For other people, will say the nature designed. Whoever designed. But why are we different, and how our sexuality differs, and how our sexuality comes together? We need to, I think as a society of today, the Western society, 21st century, but we don't understand what sexuality really is, other beyond the physical side. And that's where I brought the theory of the two suns. Two suns. Why two suns? What's the two suns? How the energy flow from a man to a woman in a very personal situation of a sexual intercourse. What happens? Where the energy comes from? Who is the reprocessor? How two people can create the common system, how that builds both or destroys both. I mean, this is very, very touchy topic for most people. Most people will not even discuss it. I was myself for many, many years really not able to even touch this topic because it was too embarrassing to talk about it. Yet, this very specific, basic question is affecting our social life, our moral life, our ethical life, our society, our culture.
Yes.
This is where everything starts. I would say most of the crimes that we experience in society starts because of lack of understanding of this. If you squeeze it hard enough, you will find out then the area not understanding or doing something wrong in the area of sexuality has a direct secondary or thirdly or fourthly influence on people's behavior that lead to criminality. This is costing society a huge loss of resources, huge loss of talent. I honestly believe some of those people who commit those different crimes, if they understood themselves in that regard, they probably will never go that way, will never commit those crimes. Yet the society is going to throw the book at them because something just happened.
Now, you're not suggesting that it's because of the sexual abuse of people necessarily, but the system on the whole, understand how sexual energy works.
Right. The society in general, beyond the psychological and bodily experience part, we do not give any appreciation. I mean, I never heard in any kind of official schooling talking about energy in the sexual context. Nobody talks about this. They don't even know what it is. Who we are, how things happen, why, what's the reason why we do what we do in the normal context. And only in the context when you understand how things are supposed to work, only you can assess the damage of those who are causing the damage and the extent of it. Okay.
Indeed. And the way you put it, if I can summarize, I've written down here, is that in this way the energy matrix works, the male gathers the energy from the outside and is projected through the phallus through intercourse, right?
Yes.
And projected up, where the female gathers the energy, takes it up all the way up into the pineal gland, which then is shared back with the male, and the cycle
correct
again and again.
Yes, that's the cycle of energy, but the primary influential cycle always starts with the man. I mean, this is nothing, my statement has nothing to do with putting the man higher than a woman. Absolutely not.
Of course not. Right.
I'm trying to approach this from the systemic perspective, how the system was designed. And again, in a Christian tradition, for example, if we go to the Bible, to the order of creation, Adam and Eve. Well, if we read very, very carefully how the order of creation was done, at the beginning, Adam, the man, was created by God. But Adam, at that point, was not a father. Adam only began capability of becoming a father at the moment of creation of the Eve. You understand me?
No, absolutely right. It's a synergistic affair starting on an atomic level, starting with the basic materials of the universe, the logos and the prima
Right,
materia
right.
preceding everything. And so
Yeah.
this is a synergistic cycle of energy. And tell us,
In the context of Adam, the creator, the God creator, have shared the ability to create life with men, through Adam, and ongoing through other men. Of course, women as being mothers in that context. So what I'm trying to say, I mean, going back to all this, the Adam only became father in the context of the Eve. If there was no Eve, there will be no Adam. There will be no fatherhood. There will be no motherhood, but there will be definitely no fatherhood.
and so what does this look like in its absolute highest expression? What could this look like, in your opinion, as expressed on in life on Earth?
What the highest expression of life on earth obviously is motherhood and fatherhood.
Oh, say from a spiritual point of view, even beyond that, as a spiritual expression, the quality of life.
Well, obviously, when the two come together in a perfect union, when they communicate, they do experience the life to the fullest as one. The oneness of life. That is what's the objective goal is, I guess. The truth become one with the creator, I guess. I would say with the source of life. So you're basically fulfilling the original mission.
To reunite with the source.
Right. Absolutely.
You say that this was understood in the Babylonian culture. They understood these principles, and they
Right.
also understood it could be used for good and for evil. Do you want to elaborate on that for a moment?
Based on my reading of various sources from those times and different authors, one of them was Christopher Dunn, Dunn, who
Yes.
wrote a famous book about the pyramids
Mm-hmm.
as an energy source, an electromagnetic field source. I have come to the realization that powers to be that obviously always want to control the rest of us, the rest of the people, have tapped this powerful and secret knowledge how to manipulate the magnetic field. So the influence of that power can be harnessed, not to build up, but to control and destroy the individual.
Yes.
So it's a two-edged sword. And well, we see through the history, we see different times. We had the Babylonian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Then later on, we go fast forward. We have other empires. Then we have the Roman Empire, and the manipulation of this energy has been done to people, to the common man, on many different levels. It comes in different packages. It may come through to killing of throwing a bunch of people to the lions, the Colosseum. It may come into concentration camps in Auschwitz. It may come to many different sources. But the bottom line is the control of the life as we know. It's at the helm here.
Yes. And one of the things you get into, which I'll just again say right up front, is rather graphic, but these are body parts and these are actions and these are damaged psyches we're talking about. So it's something that can't be avoided anymore. I mean, many people, David Icke included, who I interviewed and spoke about this recently, have come out saying we have to talk about this damage. Otherwise, how are we ever going to heal it as a civilization? And one of the things you say in the book is that anal sex doesn't matter if it's heterosexual, homosexual, has
Yes.
reversing the field and has a
Right.
trauma to it that
Right.
moves beyond the given area.
That's right. That's right. For example, I can give you actually going back to the biblical times, to the time of the Bible. We have the famous Sodom and Gomorrah that the gods destroyed. I mean, for many, many years during my school of theology, I was saying, I was asking professors, I was looking for the evidence. I said, what was the difference between the Sodom and Gomorrah? What was the difference? Why two cities? And here you go. In Sodom, the primary residents, the residents of Sodom were practicing homosexual sex, anal sex, homosexual. In Gomorrah, there was a practice of not homosexual, but heterosexual sex with the anal intercourse with women. And if we look from the biblical perspective, both cities were destroyed.
And as you say, it's like almost like a shredding or a ripping up of the energy field because
Right.
the shock sends through the body,
Right.
up the spine, rippling out into the psyche and the spirit.
Right. Well, your psyche is this psychological life, or the function of the brain is somewhat a bridge between your spiritual and physical side. Now, if you do touch the physical side, you're also touching the psychological side. The psychological side, when damaged, and of course the energy field gets damaged on the physical side, it is invisible, but it's still physical side of it. It's still energy field. That will leap it through to your abilities on the spiritual side.
Yes.
So one is connected to the other. And in my view, all this abuse to children, it's really about spirituality. It's really putting a young person a block of relationship on a higher level to the higher beings.
Yes.
That's the ultimate product of this.
Yes, and in fact, I'm going to take a moment to read a comment that David Icke made in my recent interview with him regarding this because, like you, it was also succinct. He said, anal sex with the child happens at the root chakra, which moves up through the spine and affects the brain development. Elites are looking to reorient the field through sexual abuse to create a predatory mindset such as their own. What does this do to your psychology? It's almost incomprehensible. It scrambles and distorts you in terms of what you will like, what you will be like, what your perceptions will be, and how you will see the world, and how you see yourself in comparison to if this didn't happen in the first place.
100% agreement, right on the target.
Yeah, and the thing is, you accept the fact there are many benign and kind of obvious reasons people choose a sexual orientation. That's not what we're talking about. That's
No.
where the damage comes. It comes from
Right.
abuse, right?
Well, the abuse has everything to do with the lack of the consent of the will. If somebody is of the orientation, chooses to be in that relationship, I am certainly not the person who is going to throw the stones. I have some friends who are that way, whether they are born that way or chose that way. But I still have shared with them some of my thoughts. Sometimes they don't agree with me. Sometimes they agree with me. But the bottom line is, if we're looking at the whole picture, at the big picture, when we connect the dots, what we're looking at is that the anal sex with the minors and with people causes the victims, the receivers of that energy, the disturbance or permanent damage in their energy field that is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Who they are, how they relate to others, how they process and reprocess the energy from the world and among themselves.
And especially the younger this happens to an individual.
Right.
And one of the things that Pope Francis said is there should be zero tolerance for sexual abuse of children because this is a crime. And then he said, no, worse. It's leaving them alive but destroyed. But at the same time, he's done very little to curtail it in real terms.
Unfortunately, you're dealing with the institution where things are moving very slow. I would even suspect that the many who are in the powers, they do understand what they do not understand the topic. We were just talking about it here. They do not understand how it works. It's not just the parts that are being accessed. It's more than the parts. It's not the ludidity. It's not seeing a child with no clothes on. Is something is injecting the child or the individual with the energy that is going to take them off the balance.
Yeah.
This is what our leaders don't understand. They never studied it. And I don't blame them. I don't blame many of them because they never studied it. They don't have a way. They don't have a clue about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can tell you, Regina, I would not have the clue myself if the stuff didn't happen to me that it did.
Yeah.
If there is a lock in the insult and the injury, maybe that was the lock.
That you could put pieces to come together and come forward and talk about it. And I have this final question for you, and that is, you were lucky in that you encountered these Native American elders who knew about this and who knew what to do in a very profound spiritual way. Outside of this, what have you found by way of help for people that have been through this and would like to feel themselves complete or whole again?
So far, do not know one resource that is capable of delivering any help in this regard.
So what do you say to people that are listening to this, who know people that have been victims, who are themselves have been victims? What do you say to them when you tell them these things? What are they supposed to do with this information?
I would say we need to get our minds together, get our resources together, and we need to create a program that will be actually a viable program of providing the healing and resource for people who did experience this. But this is pre-kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
This is pre-kindergarten. We have many different tools at this time that were not available probably for a long time, maybe pre-Babylonian times they were available. But we are able to actually see, there is a number of devices that you can actually assess the energy field and a drop in it.
Yes.
From various parts of the body. We can measure the frequency. We can say what's happening.
Yes.
How our body cumulatively run, how certain parts run. I did not have those tools available at the time. Neither the elders from the tribe had, but they had powerful spirits enough to be able to deliver what they needed to deliver. It worked, and that's the bottom line. It worked.
Yeah. Well, Wes, I couldn't agree with you more. To be able to start taking this problem seriously, to talk about it openly, to start protecting our sons, our daughters, and each other from this abuse and stop the silence is critical. Nothing can move forward. No real consensus on bringing funding and whatever is required for healing together will really happen until we can talk about this and understand it is a ubiquitous problem that's plaguing all of humanity.
We can spend billions of dollars. We can have mountains of paperwork and policies. It's not going to work for a very simple fact. The depression of the soul is damaged, and the soul which is damaged is looking to fulfill the void. Unfortunately, they operate on the dark side, and they're going to fulfill the void by stealing the innocence from others. That's the honest truth.
So, final words on this. I agree with you. We need to come together. We need to talk. We need to put programs together that actually can help create balance and healing again within the victims of this. And meanwhile, do you have any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
I wanted to thank you for tapping this topic for the interview itself, which definitely helps to spread the message and awareness, especially the awareness. What we're looking at. I am very grateful to David Icke for his insights. I have actually been listening to some of his stuff, and it's quite often it's on target, but he is definitely not very conventional.
Right, indeed.
So thank you very much, and I will hope to work for a betterment of the humanity before the time is running, because the time is running out. And like with anything else, if the certain project goes beyond the point of recovery, there might be just no point of recovery.
Indeed. So I thank you very much for being brave enough to not only share your story, but for taking the time and thoughtfulness to begin researching and putting the pieces together on a spiritual level. I wish you could only teach it to the rest of the Catholic Church as a starting place.
Well, that will be a good start. I would hope that certainly one day somebody's going to wake up and say, well, maybe we need to relearn some things, because the way so far our performance has been less than mediocre.
Indeed. Well, Wes, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Again, not an easy topic, but one that we have to start talking about, including with members of our own family who may have gone through this themselves. So it's a beginning point. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com. Thank you for watching this video. You can find many more like it free of charge by going to reginameredith.com. And if you're finding that this kind of content is adding value to your life, you might want to support my work by clicking on the Patreon button on the website, reginameredith.com. As a patron, you have special videos, insider commentary, and much more. Check it out.